Hello all, welcome to European News Center with I, Justin St. Cyr.
And me, Matthew Lemon.
Today we're looking into the 20-year period of economic depression and the rise of fascism and Nazism in Europe between the Great Wars.
Very interesting topic choice there, Justin.
Let's begin.
After the ending of World War I in 1919, many European countries were devastated economically and physically from the trench warfare and incessant bombings.
In the post-war hunt for peace, the Treaty of Versailles was drafted and forced Germany to take the blame for the war and pay heavy reparations, which devastated the economy even further.
Taking a country whose fault it wasn't and making them be blamed for it, then adding billions of dollars of reparations on top of it, wasn't the best of plans.
In fact, we have a demonstration of what it was like to be Germany.
He's Germany.
Germany wasn't the only country who thought the Versailles Treaty was unfair, as the U.S. thought it would give rise to new conflicts, which it did.
The Germans wanted out of this treaty that they signed so bad that they signed the Locarno Pact, which gave France land and a promise that they wouldn't invade again, and then also joined the weak League of Nations and even signed the Kellogg-Briand Pact.
Neither of these pacts could get them out of the Versailles Treaty, which, although it was harsh, it was weak.
Nobody enforced this treaty, besides France, who took it as their duty to enforce it. When Germany didn't pay, France invaded and took over the Rhineland of Germany.
This led to a massive spike of inflation in Germany, as the government was printing more and more money to pay off its debts.
With Germany in huge inflation by 1929, it's only proper that another market would fail as well, and the collapse of all of Europe. I'm sure you know what we're talking about, the Great Depression.
When the American stock market fell on itself in 1929, it sent American investors in a wild spiral, pulling out investments from Europe.
What's the matter?
Germany, already heavily devastated, was knocked back down and at one point in its time had 40% of its workers out of jobs.
The Great Depression also hit England hard, and sure enough, spread like wildfire, with France being the last country to see somewhat of economic depression in 1932.
This ravaged and already physically damaged European continent is one of the true main factors in the rise of fascist and Soviet movements in Europe. Here's an act of English during the Great Depression.
Oh, I might. I've been forced out of my job. I'll tell you, there's no way I'll be able to support my family this year.
I hear you, Justin. Me too. With the decline in my coal industry, I got nothing to look forward to. Well, except for my scrumptious tea and biscuits.
Ah, yes, our beloved tea. One that our very own government will soon tax and tariff. Can you believe it?
A tax on tea? Absolutely outrageous. I don't think I could stand my own country then, acting like a bunch of buffoons if we did that.
I'll second that, my pal. Also, who will you be voting for in this upcoming election?
Justin, my dear, the choice is clear. The Liberal Party couldn't solve our economic situation, and the Conservatives brought us little prosperity. We must vote for those dang Labours.
A third party in as many election years. What a devastation.
We hope you enjoyed our portrayal of the English pub in 1930.
While we might be very incorrect, there are some facts in there. 1 in 4 British working men were unemployed.
The coal, steel, and textile industry were all practically up in smoke due to the economic severity coming out of World War I.
It's also a fact that the British people were indeed subject to 3 political parties at this time, and no one party controlled it more than the other 2 elections between 1920 and 1937.
England's party system was so bad that all 3 claimed the credit for dragging Britain out of severe economic depression, and due to all the voting, for the most part, it could actually be credited to all 3.
At the start of summer in 1937, a prime minister whose party would continue was elected. Neville Chamberlain, the infamous prime minister, was elected with the Conservatives, and he would be the next prime minister.
Things were looking up for the Brits in 1939. Well, they were looking up until September.
Lucky for you, we decided not to act like the French.
Yeah, lucky you.
Anyways, the French post-war life was somewhat different than the Britons. France borders Germany, which meant there was great danger that Germany should become aggressive again.
So our baguette pals took it upon themselves to heavily enforce the Treaty of Versailles and occupy the German land. They also built a great wall to keep Germans out because they weren't bringing their best, the Maginot Line. Obviously, this was costly and began inflation as France printed out the money to resolve this issue.
This fiasco threw French leader Poincaré out of leadership and brought in a very new leftist party, somewhat deemed socialist.
No need to worry though. The socialists were voted out and Poincaré was brought back just in time for the Great Depression to reach France by 1932.
Poincaré led them through a tough time, but it wasn't good enough. The leftist party, the Popular Front, took over in 1936 and implemented many modern work forms and laws. It helped ease the pain of the Depression, but leaders were changing more than ever.
French trust in their leaders was at an all-time low heading into World War II.
Between the wars, newly found Italy was struggling. The First War brought devastation to the population and to the economy. The government had promised land and couldn't get it.
Welcome in Benito Mussolini, the political leader of his hometown group, the Fascio dei Combattimenti.
This group was initially socialist, but after many failures to seize roles due to this, they switched to the far right, grasping support from many middle-class and wealthy families.
The growing movement, mixed with political instability, led Mussolini to believe that he could become a dictator. He planned to march on Rome, did just that, and was named prime minister in 1922.
In 1924, Giacomo Matteotti was murdered by fascists in order to have total control. As Matteotti was a socialist leader and chairman, at this moment Italy became a true totalitarian fascist state.
Mussolini set up laws to control mass leisure and make most women into homemakers to create babies in fascist families with fascist ideologies.
Also, in 1929, he set up a Lateran Accords, which was an agreement between Mussolini and the Roman Catholic Church. Mussolini was heavily supported by the Church in return for money, sole religion rights, and authority and an autonomy over the Vatican City.
This gave Mussolini power over his individual army, the nation's army, and the church, setting up a practical dictatorship over Italy.
While he had a dictatorship, he never quite reached the power of Stalin in Soviet Union or Russia, or Hitler in Germany.
Let's go back to our early talks about the Versailles Treaty in Germany. Post-war Germany was ravaged physically. They lost a bunch of working men, and land had been destroyed. And on top of that, they were being forced to pay billions of dollars to be policed by the French.
The treaty also had set limitations on the amount of men in the army they could have, therefore losing more jobs. It also had no hope that the democratic government set up before the rise of Hitler wasn't powerful.
The Weimar Republic, as they were called, was a democratic government run by a series of weak leaders who tried to pull Germany from depression. They never really controlled the army or businesses, and because they were weak, they helped give rise to Hitler.
Hitler, who was the leader of the socialists in Germany, or Nazis, had already attempted to take over once before with the help of a revolt. The revolt failed miserably, and he eventually had to take over the Reichstag, the German government, with his party, and shortly after was elected chancellor.
The Socialist Party and Hitler tried so many ways to do the economic and physical ruin of the state of Germany, and his party controlled the Reichstag because of the middle and wealthy class votes.
It had taken Hitler almost a decade, but finally he achieved chancellor with party control. His first few steps were implemented in an enabling act which gave him a practical dictatorship. He was now free to do whatever he wanted.
Hitler's bodyguard, known as the SS, rose to become the secret police force and terrorized anyone who was against Hitler. Political prisoners were often the first to go, and in fact the first use of concentration camps was for political prisoners.
To keep his power over future generations, Hitler used youth clubs to teach boys and girls Nazi ideology, which helped boys become SS and girls become family makers.
He was also used his pedestal power to force anti-Semitism on the state. He set up laws forbidding Jews from workplace, stripping them of citizenship and basic human rights.
He led boycotts against Jewish businesses that ultimately led up to the Kristallnacht, with which Jewish businesses were raided, burned, smashed, torn apart, or even blown up. It was the beginning of the Holocaust. The struggle for leadership with Lenin's death in the early 1920s, Joseph V. Stalin and Leon Trotsky were the two main protagonists, with Stalin emerging victorious by the late 1920s.
Stalin's program called for a more gradual transformation of Soviet society than did Trotsky's, and had its primary objective the consolidation of communism in the USSR, rather than Trotsky's ideal of immediate world revolution.
Later, Stalin adopted more radical measures. Nevertheless, the Soviet Union continued to guide the Communist parties aboard through the Third International, or Comintern.
At home, the new economic policy instituted in 1921 was replaced by full government planning with the adoption of the first five-year plan, one of Stalin's few. The plan was drawn up by Gosplan, the State Planning Commission, setting goals and priorities for virtually the entire economy and emphasizing the production of capital and not consumer goods.
A system of collective and state farms was imposed over widespread peasant opposition, which was expressed nobility in the slaughter of livestock.
Those comparatively prosperous peasants who refused to join the new agricultural institutions were liquidated by drastic means.
More than 5 million peasants' households were eliminated. Their property was confiscated, and most of the peasants were sent as forced laborers to Siberia.
This also led to a famine in 1932 through 33. By the end of the 1930s, 99% of the cultivated land was in collective farms. Industrialization was accelerated, and the production of desperately needed industrial raw materials and capital equipment was stressed at the expense of consumer goods.
One of the major results of the successive 5-year plans was the spectacular industrial and agricultural development of the Urals, Siberian USSR, and Central Asian USSR.